All right. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody then to another CTO member webinar. Thanks for joining us again today. Before we start, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of all the lands on which we meet today. And I pay my respects to all Aboriginal elders past, present and emerging. And I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that are here with us today. So welcome one and all. Today's webinar presentation will cover the concepts of identifying volunteer motivations and overcoming barriers, rethinking and redeveloping volunteer roles, recruiting volunteers, resources available to volunteer leaders, and all of this which feeds into the core concepts of both the National Volunteer Strategy and the New South Wales Volunteer Strategy. You'll also be provided with information of the Centre for Volunteering redesigned website, designed to make the work volunteer leaders do a whole lot easier. So with that said, I'd like to introduce our presenter today. Some of you may remember Clint from the conference. We welcome Clint Burton-Shaw. He's the Senior Manager for the Sector Development and Engagement from the Centre for Volunteering. Clint is an experienced operations manager, people leader and learning and development consultant who applies pragmatic approaches to tackling organisational problems. So without further ado, Clint, if you're ready to go, I'll hand the ball over to you.
I am. Thank you, Vicky, and welcome all. And hopefully I can live up to the spiel and give you something that is very tangible that you can take away at the end of this. And more importantly, leave you with some tools and resources that even if you were to completely forget everything that I mentioned today, you're not left feeling alone. And if there's one thing that I do know is that time is precious for us all, and being able to go back and look at all this in your own time, without any sort of barriers and the like, is really important. When we get to the resources section, you'll see that there are plenty of them available now. And there's also an ongoing suite of webinars that you can register for and carry on your learning. And the best part is most of them will have recordings that you can check out in your own time. So if you feel like changing away from Netflix for a night or two and getting some professional development in, you most certainly can. So I'll just share my presentation with you. Look, I am more than happy to take as many questions and answers that are thrown at me towards the end there. If there's anything majorly urgent that comes up, do feel free to pop it into the chat. And if it catches my eye, I may even address it there and then. Looks like it's a small group at the moment, so more than happy to just have the mics come off when the time comes and we can have a bit of a chat. So if you did catch me at the conference last year, a lot of what I went through was really about going, okay, COVID hit and it was bad. It was bad for everyone. But if there was some silver lining out of all of it, it was almost like the spring cleanup you threaten to do in your house that you never get to. The garage that needs a tidy up and never happens. The spare room where everything gets dumped that you think, I'll get to that one day and give it a tidy up, and it never happens. Well, COVID was the catalyst to make that spring cleanup happen, if you will. And we know it had a huge impact on volunteer programs. I mean, just the fact that when we went into lockdown, we lost so many of our volunteers due to the restrictions, due to health concerns, etc., etc. It's really important then that you sit there and go, okay, that came out of nowhere. What are we going to do so our programs are more sustainable and more robust moving forward? And one thing we do know, and this has come about from a lot of research that has come from the state peaks and also from our national from Volunteering Australia, which is our national peak, is that 83% of volunteering involving organisations need more volunteers. So it's one thing to then say, okay, well, we need more volunteers. Let's just go on a recruitment drive. But if we're going to do the same, but different, we're going to get the same results. So we need to start thinking about this a little bit differently. And throughout my presentation and what I talk about, this is not specific to any one organisation. All organisations are in this, or volunteering organisations are in this boat. And of course, everyone's programs and everyone's requirements are slightly different. So there's some generic info here. And we'll talk at the end there about other ways you can sort of get involved to try and have your program specifically looked at. But even if you can just sort of take away bits and pieces of what I'm speaking about, you'll find that you will approach your programs and the way you approach volunteers slightly different, that may yield some great results as far as getting back to the robust programs that we once had. Now, the national strategy for volunteering has been released by Volunteering Australia. That actually launched in February at the national conference. And it's been about 12 months worth of work where they've gone out into the sector and into the volunteering ecosystem and consulted with the state peaks and stakeholders around the nation to come up with what is a blueprint for the next 10 years for volunteering. And it's quite an interesting read. I do highly recommend that you head over to Volunteering Australia's website and download the document. They've got a couple on there, one being the full strategy, one being almost like the quick sheet, if you will. It's a huge document. And just take time to really think about the different strategies. There's 11 strategic objectives in there, and having a look at that and sort of thinking, okay, where are we at the moment? Volunteering Australia is about to embark on the next stage in this implementation, which is looking at how to implement and what to do with this and build the evaluation frameworks around it and the like. So do watch this space as more information rolls out. The state peak bodies will obviously be involved to work with organisations like yourself to help with implementing the strategy. But if there's one cool thing out of all this is there's nothing that was overly shocking. And I say that because what I did in preparation for today's talk is I took a look at what I've been rolling out over the last 12 months and went, okay, is there anything I need to turn on its head? And there hasn't been, which is great for me because it meant that I didn't have to do a heap of work to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. But it also meant that we do have a good grasp on what's going on out there, and that really we are all, whether it be the national peak body, the state peak bodies, or just the organisations on the ground, we're all heading in the right direction for making volunteering as important and as necessary as it really is. So that's really cool, and that really warms my heart to know that this isn't like absolutely shocking breaking news type stuff. So to kick off, one thing I do with a lot of my presentations is I get everyone to sort of stop and think for a moment, who are your volunteers? Now, I don't necessarily mean, you've got John, Jay, Mary, Joe in your organization. I'm thinking more about who are they really? Why are they with you? Why have they been with you for as long as they have? What do they bring to the table? What skills do they have? What are their motivations? What are their barriers to volunteering, and how are you as a volunteer leader going to help tap into those motivations and break down some of their barriers? And the key message I try to give everyone is if you can address their barriers and embrace their motivations, you're going to generate organically a much better volunteering experience. And in turn, you're going to find that you're going to have a lot more volunteers at the ready. Your programs are going to be robust and sustainable, and you'll be able to almost plan ahead and tackle potential changes that come up. Now, this is not the silver bullet. I wish it was, that if you did X, Y, and Z, everything's going to be fantastic for you. But what it does is it allows you to sit there and really think about how are you running your programs and how am I going to align that to the individuals that are helping me achieve my mission. And that is the absolute key to this. We are working with individuals, and they've all got their own motivations and they've all got their own barriers. And to quote, I believe it may have been almost coined, if you will, from someone who's very popular within the ecosystem, Penny York. She talks about the volunteer pay packet. And the volunteer pay packet is, okay, well, we know we don't get remunerated for the volunteering we do, but you do get something out of it. And for a lot of people, yes, we all have the do good as a huge tick mark on why we volunteer. But what else are you getting from the volunteer experience? That means that you show up thick and thin, take on sometimes, let's face it, pretty ordinary kind of tasks and continue to contribute. What is that pay packet you're receiving? And if you can tap into that, you'll find that you'll not only retain your volunteers, but you open yourself up to a whole bunch of new ones. So, of course, it wouldn't be a presentation without some stats. And these all come from the State of Volunteering report that was it released in 2021 from the Centre for Volunteering. And it primarily looked around the year of 2020 and in the lead up. And of course, these stats have been somewhat impacted greatly. I should say, not somewhat, I'd say heavily impacted by COVID. But there are a few key call outs. When we look at volunteer motivations, we know that to help others and for social connections are huge. I mean, 62.4%, 31.5%, it speaks for itself. But the two call outs that I think are really interesting, but often get, I won't say swept under the carpet, but maybe not addressed as much as they could, are the want to use skills and experience and the want to develop new skills and gain work experience. I think this is huge. Volunteering offers people the opportunity to try something new, to potentially tap into some skills they already have or develop new skills. And they may not necessarily be able to do that with their 9 to 5. Let's face it, if they're doing the 9 to 5, they're working on someone else's bottom line. So to get experimental sometimes just won't get across a line because what's the financial impact of that? What's the time impact of that? But to be able to go and do some volunteering and try new things and be able to bring some new thoughts and ideas and skills, whether it's something that they've had deep inside them for a while, or maybe it's something they're, training up in their own time and they want to tap into it. That is a really great way to not only help the volunteer get something more out of their experience, but to help you get new skills and ideas brought to the table for your volunteer programs. I see this quite regularly as we continue to move towards this digital realm, this idea of everything being done online in the cloud, unless of course you've got physical activities you need to do, and understandably, particularly with organizations like community transport, you can't virtually drive. Well, you can't virtually drive a car yet, although I'm sure Elon Musk will have something to say about that. But there are roles that you could potentially be doing from anywhere. And then that starts to lead into using the skills to learn new platforms and to learn, how to work with online platforms and work in different locations and the like. And that can then feed into barriers. And I point this out because one of the core areas that volunteers are saying is a real barrier for them is time. And for a lot of cases, when you dig in, it's not that they don't have the time, it's just that the volunteering opportunities don't necessarily suit them. So if you think about it, a lot of opportunities are run during business hours. But if you're a volunteer who has a 9 to 5, how are you going to do both? I volunteer. I volunteer for a youth radio station down here in Hobart. And the coolest part about what I do is the fact that anything I do for them, I can do from home. Even the radio show itself, I can set myself up here at my office with my microphone and all that and pre-record it and send it to them. I could do it from home, except it's just a bit too noisy. But more importantly, some of the other stuff that they need, like some of the administration, I was their training coordinator for way too many years before I stepped down because I've got some extra project work I'm doing. Um, I was able to do all that without actually stepping foot in the offices in Hobart, which was fantastic. And so I was developing training, working on their spreadsheets for some of their membership work that they were doing and projects and the like. And all of that was done remotely and after hours, which meant I could go to work, do my 9 to 5, although it never really is 9 to 5, get home, do what I need to do with the kids and the family. And once everyone's gone to bed, maybe jump online for a bit, work on some training materials. And that really suited me. And it did a couple of things. The first was I got to continue using the skills that I love. As much as I've moved more into a project management type role nowadays, I love training. That's probably why you can't stop me from getting on webinars and doing presentations. And I love building training materials. And there's not a lot of time in the 9 to 5 to do that anymore, but there's certainly time to volunteer that skill. So I get to keep that little bit of a little bit of something bubbling inside me. And being able to do it after hours means that I can work that in to what I have to do the rest of my days, which is fantastic. Costs is also a huge one. There's a lot of costs involved in volunteering. If you're not getting paid, you've got to sit there and account for the travel costs, the time away from doing other things. Maybe you need to purchase additional lunches or whatever else because, you're out and about. You might need to think about things like, is there childcare costs involved with being off doing some volunteering and you've got kids who need to be at home? So if you can rethink the volunteer programs to sit there and go, okay, what can we do to reduce costs? Well, we've got people who want to volunteer for us, but childcare is an issue and it's quite expensive. Okay, well, then they can do it from home. They can do it remotely. Now, obviously, again, there are certain roles where that's not going to be possible, but that's not every role. And I guarantee in every organization, there are going to be roles that require you to be at a set location at a set time for reasons that cannot change. Then there are going to be roles that they've just been done that way because that's how they were designed way back when. And no one has ever thought to sit there, do the spring clean, rethink how that role could work and what the other opportunities are. And more importantly, find out from their volunteers how this would tap into their motivations and address their barriers. Which leads me to the whole time focusing on the volunteer experience, which is a huge strategic objective within the national strategy. And I want you to think everyone is unique and each person has their own motivation for donating their time, skills without financial reward. We know this. People who volunteer do so for a variety of reasons. Okay. And you need to find ways to tap into the barriers and find out how by doing things like looking at your programs, reviewing requirements, and considering the impact a volunteer may face by volunteering with you and making a few reasonable adjustments, how you can get more out of your volunteers and get more volunteers. And what's the easiest way to do this? Talk to your volunteers. So many times I talk to organizations and I say, okay, what are the challenges? And they rattle off the usual suspects. Okay. And what are the motivations for volunteers showing up? Oh, they love the social aspect. Yeah, but what else? They've never actually sat down and just talked to their volunteers, gotten to know them. And when they do, sometimes it's in a formal setting, which means that everyone puts their guard up. The best advice I can provide in this instance is to talk to your volunteers in an informal setting and just listen. Really listen. Don't make it feel like the Spanish Inquisition and you're going to sit there and interrogate them for hours on end. Just have a chat. Find out why they're volunteering and why have they been around. If they're a long-term volunteer, why have they been around for so long? What is it about your program and what you do that is getting them to come through the door day in, day out? What else can they bring to the table? No one individual stops development the moment they're born. We're always trying new things and learning and wanting to tap into our skills, and our motivations change. The reason why we do one thing one day may completely change in a year's time. COVID caused a lot of us to develop new skills, look at new skills, change up things. I mean, suddenly everyone was a baker making sourdough bread. How can you allow them to bring those skills and that motivation to the table? Are they happy doing what they've been doing? Or is maybe the shine starting to rub off a little bit? Find out. Maybe they're the sort of person who doesn't want to make a fuss. You give them a task, they'll get it done, they're happy to do so. But deep down, they're actually really doing it begrudgingly. How can you find that out without talking to them and having a true heart-to-heart? Has their situation changed? And what's the impact? A lot of people have found that just the dynamics within their family has changed a lot since COVID. Maybe much older retiree or semi-retired parents are now looking to look after their grandchildren. cost of childcare. Maybe their kids have now got their changes in their jobs. And so, what do we do with the grandkids? Okay, we'll go and see grandma and grandpa, get it on that way. So talk to them and find out what the impact is. Maybe they've had to take up additional work that they didn't have previously. I know myself, with the amount of hours that I used to do for volunteering, it has dropped off because I've taken on additional work, and that's only been recently. I don't mind saying, but it's because the kids have got dental bills coming up that are really hurting the hip pocket. So I'll take on extra work on the side just to keep those bills sorted. Once that drops off, I'll probably turn around and be looking for more volunteering opportunities. And that's just one instance. And what is stopping them from volunteering more? Ask the question. In a perfect world, how could you volunteer more? It could be something as simple as, I'd love to come down here more, but I take the bus every day and it's costing me a fortune. Is there anything you can do to help them reimburse for the bus? Again, it doesn't always have to be formal. In fact, the best conversations you will have will be informal and just letting them let their hair down, drop their guard, and open up to you. Another thing to do is consider the fact that everyone plays a role irrespective of what the volunteer situation is. And I say this because when I talk to a lot of organizations, they feel like because their volunteers aren't doing what they once did, that they're no longer as engaged. And that isn't always the case. Volunteers are more than just task doers. Now, admittedly, you've got things you need to get done within your organization, and it'd be nice if you had a whole army of people to come and help out. But just because a volunteer isn't there every day or every other day doing what they once did, that doesn't mean that they're not advocates for your organization and your programs, which can be some of the best marketing you will ever get. They could be just wanting to get involved with fundraisers, things that come up every so often and that they can fit into their schedule. They're engaged community members, and that's important because when they're in the community and they're talking about the good that you do, that plays dividends, not only in recruiting more new volunteers, but just in getting other people to be aware of what your organization does and the benefit it brings. And they're committed supporters. The fact that they even walked through your door in day one, if they've had a great experience, they will be there to support you no matter what. Again, I use Edge Radio as an example. Whilst I'm not doing the same amount of volunteer activity I did 12 months ago, I will support them through thick and thin. And I really believe in their mission and their objectives. And I'm more than happy, as I've said to the president when I was reducing what I was doing, I'm more than happy to have a cup of coffee with her anytime for her to pick my brain. I don't have to do a lot of prep work and whatever else for that. So she knows she can reach out to me at any point in time, and I'd be more than happy to support her. The other thing to consider is some volunteers just want to do periodic or project like tasks and events. Now, so many organizations are starting to realize that this is almost like having a project team waiting in the wings, where you've got something that comes up and then you can reach out to this group of dedicated volunteers who you don't see all the time, but the moment there is a project on, they're there. And they do what needs to be done and they do it really well for the period of time that project is running, then they disappear again. And then when you need another project done, they'll come back. I liken that to, we have some volunteers at Edge who I am often surprised that they're still around because I don't see them for so long. And then we'll do something like an outside broadcast where we pack a whole bunch of gear up and we'll go out on location somewhere around Tasmania. And suddenly these volunteers appear out of the woodwork. And it's great because they've got the time to dedicate to these types of events and they like being there. Whereas some of the more dedicated volunteers, the timing of some of these events doesn't work in with their usual routines. And so they can't do this work. So you end up with almost these two groups, the ones that you can rely on for temporary projects and the ones who are just always there getting the regular work done. And it's about knowing who's who. And yeah, it's a little bit extra work for the volunteer leaders, but if you know who's who and you've got the right setup and discussion going on with them, you'll find that you'll end up having all your tasks being covered. And when it comes to looking at your tasks as part of doing the spring clean, start asking yourself a few questions. Is the work meaningful? How does it tap into their motivations? Is there a level of flexibility? And does it require specific skills or a new way of thinking? And most importantly, would you do it if you were not being paid? So let's face it, when we're getting paid for a job, we'll do just about anything within reason, because there's real money at the end of the days and we've all got bills to pay. But if you were asked to do that work for free, would you? Would you want to? Maybe you'll do it once or twice, but really is it the type of job or type of task where you're like, yeah, I'm not going to be pushed to do this too often. As you're going through, and some volunteer programs have been put in place a long time ago and never really had the dust and the cobwebs taken off on them. You've got people doing the role, and even when you recruit for more people to do that role, you just cycle through. This is what they need. This is the requirements. This is what it's all about. And no one has ever stopped to ask the question around, is this actually meaningful work? Speaking of requirements, has anyone actually looked at their role descriptions and gone, some of those requirements are no longer necessary? And I say that, and this is very generic information, but the amount of times I look through people's role descriptions and go, why have you got a lifting limit on here? What's the heaviest thing that a volunteer might lift? Oh, pen and paper. You got a 5 kilo lifting limit on here, and that's a requirement. Maybe if you remove that, you're going to suddenly open up to a more accessible. You're going to come across more accessible, and you're going to end up with more inclusion when you go to recruit. You may be able to pick up someone who is in a wheelchair because there's no longer a lifting limit. Or you might be able to get someone who isn't necessarily physically fit, but is able to do all the tasks perfectly fine, just not lift something that's 5 kilos and above. That's just one example where quite often roles and programs have got old things in them that haven't been reviewed for quite some time. And it's actually causing a barrier that doesn't need to be there. So that leads me into redesigning volunteer roles. And you can see now, based on some of the things that I've just spoken about, if you put all this, too far then. If you put all this into play, you can start to see that your roles can end up becoming more inclusive. You can potentially be tapping into the motivations of your existing volunteers, and that's going to make them happier, which means greater volunteer retention, which is huge. You then can start to seek other volunteers from other locations as well. And we'll talk about that in a second. But more importantly, you're going to sit there and have something that is going to be more tangible and sustainable for your organization. And yeah, there may be a little more management about around this, particularly if you start breaking down larger roles. And what I mean by that is sometimes I see roles where you need to be there for a full day or best part of a day. And that's not going to work for someone who needs to maybe do school drop-offs and pickups. So is there any reason why that role can't be split in two and you have two volunteers now? Now, I do know the argument that quite often gets put back to that is we're struggling to get one volunteer. How are we going to get two? But it's often the reason you're struggling to get the one volunteer is because you're looking at a role description that says, needs to be available for 6 hours. And they might only be able to put up 3. So take a look at your roles. If you do nothing else, go back to your roles and think, okay, can I implement any of these changes? And promote your roles, your organization, and the benefits you can bring. Do you have flexible roles? Are people able to do the roles remotely? Can younger people in particular, but really anyone of any working age, build a portfolio of projects and gain a reference from you. And this is one that's often overlooked by a lot of organizations, and it goes back to what I was saying about building new skills. It's kind of funny, whenever you want to change your career or potentially pivot, you start looking at, entry level to intermediate type roles, and they want you to have more experience than what you would consider a senior, and they're going to pay you like a junior. And the problem is that you've got nothing to really show that you can do the work and hopefully get you a better foot through the door. Being able to demonstrate what you've done in your volunteering space is a fantastic way to say, hey, look, this is what I've been doing. And I've kind of been doing it, for no remuneration other than just passion. And if you as a volunteer leader can provide a real reference, not just the reference that says Johnny Bloggs volunteered between this date and this day, maybe something along the lines of Johnny Bloggs volunteered for us during this date and this date and worked on this particular project. This particular project yielded this kind of result, and their input increased engagement by 20%, something like that. As an employer, I'd be looking at that going, that is fantastic. And now I can give you a buzz and just confirm that this wasn't all fluff. And great, now Johnny Bloggs has potentially scored himself a role, but they were maybe not even in the running for. That can be huge, and that can be a huge benefit. But there are some orgs who do it really well, but they don't promote that, and so no one knows that that's a real opportunity for them. If you are a inclusive and diverse workplace, please sing it from the rafters. Particularly in the inclusion space, the problem is a lot of organizations are doing a lot to become inclusive and really generate a diverse workforce, but they don't actually promote how or that they are. And so what we see is we're seeing that volunteers are searching for places that will feel safe and that have made reasonable adjustments or are willing to make reasonable adjustments for them. But you're looking through role after role after role through the various different volunteer job boards, and there's nothing that sings out to say this is the right place for you. So if you can promote that, that's going to help and potentially open up the door to new volunteers that may otherwise have just skipped over your position description on a job board. Promote the rewards and recognition that you provide for your volunteers. It could even be as simple as free coffee. And I'll tell you what, the amount of roles I've done just for a free coffee. Yeah, I like coffee. And this all leads into who really knows your organization and what do you do. And I say this because there are a lot of fantastic volunteer involving organizations out in the ecosystem. But if you're a volunteer with limited time, got some skills you want to, utilize, and you have absolutely no idea who's who in the zoo, you're going to go to those who make the most noise. And you can see that some of the bigger volunteer involving organizations rarely struggle for volunteers. They've got waiting lists. But then there are little ones who are doing just as good work, if not better, who struggle regularly to get volunteers in, but no one knows who they are. They know who they are. They know what they're about. But the random volunteer searching through social media or the volunteer job boards have no idea who you are. You need to make some noise. And this could also lead into a volunteer role unto itself, particularly with the likes of social media and how that's forever changing. Getting someone who understands those technologies and tapping into those skills could allow you to get out there and promote your organization and the work you do. And you need to promote what you do. You need to show off a little bit, generate some hype and build awareness. And just down the bottom of that slide there, I've got like all the different social media icons I can think of. And this is constantly changing. Where at one stage, you could just about get away with Facebook and LinkedIn and maybe Twitter, you've got to now contend with those who are on Snapchat, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. There's a heap of them. And you need to be making some noise. I know myself, I use a large number of these social media sites, and there is so much noise, and you need to be able to cut through. The amount of times you're just doom scrolling, going through, seeing endless amounts of junk on there, and yet you want to sit there and cut through that with an interesting video of something really cool you're doing, or a fantastic graphic that makes the general punter stop and go, wow, what is that? As opposed to, we're this organization, we do this and it's really good. We already know that, but that's not going to sit there and grab my attention when I'm doom scrolling through Facebook, for instance. Spread the word far and wide. A lot of organizations are fantastic with word of mouth, but I tend to think that creates an echo chamber. Everyone tends to, the problem with word of mouth is that everyone talks to same minded people. My circle of friends think like me, are from similar backgrounds to me. Yeah, there are a few exceptions to that. So if I'm out there spreading the word, you're going to get other people like me. And that's the same for all your volunteers. They're going to be similar to them. And so you end up with a lot of volunteers who are all similar backgrounds, similar knowledge, similar skills, very similar. But if you want to go further, like if you want to build in more skills, get a different type of volunteer, you need to go further than this. Community notice boards are great for that, but you can only go so far. Flyers are fantastic, but bear in mind it could be a little bit labor intensive getting them out there. Street presses, quite often like those newspapers you see outside of music stores and the like, they're fantastic. Community and local newspapers, again, great reach there. Can be a little bit time consuming to get them in each of them. Social media and websites, huge. You might need to get someone in to help you with that. As far as I tend to say, tap into the very young generation who were born with phones in their hand, as far as I'm concerned. That can really help, and they'll know how to get out there and use all the right hashtags and tag the right people in. And they'll also know about boosting posts and the like if you've got a bit of money to throw towards social media to get it out there and expand the reach. Tap into community radio. Not just saying that because I volunteer for one, but it's a resource that a lot of organizations don't realize. And you get a lot of people listen to community radio. You can get a widespread of listeners, and it's actually not all that expensive. A lot of community radio organizations will run a message, a community service announcement, because they're not allowed to call it advertising, for very little. And they can run that at various times and work with you to make sure you get the best reach for your campaign. Open days and community events, old school, but huge. Go volunteer, seek volunteer and ethical jobs. There are various different job boards that you can get your roles up on. And, just like using Seek to get a full-time or part-time job that's paid. And of course, the Centre for Volunteering, and we can help you to develop your role descriptions and to also get them advertised. Which, speaking of the Centre for Volunteering, you're not alone. This is the fun part of my presentation, is where we get to talk about the different resources we've brought together particularly over the last year. We've done a lot of work to really improve our website, for starters, to make it a lot easier to use, and really, really bring some fantastic resources together. So I'm just going to switch over now to our website. And this all launched in October 31st last year. And we had a couple of core requirements. Firstly, the website had to be easy to use and navigate. That was a non-negotiable when we talked to our developers. It had to work really well, whether you were on a full-blown desktop PC or whether you were getting around on your mobile phone. And they really worked hard to make sure that it does work well. We needed things to be quick and easy to find without too many clicks. And we also had to make sure that we met accessibility requirements. We're very proud to say that it's meeting AA standard for accessibility, and we've also got little cool pieces of functionality like this little widget over here, which brings up the accessibility menu, and you can change all different characteristics of the website to suit accessibility requirements. And even if you have no accessibility requirements, it's pretty cool to play with anyway, just to see what it can do. But more importantly, we've also gone and built it on top of our massive knowledge base. So before I get into the knowledge base, I do want to call out a couple of cool services we offer. First of all is the Volunteer Manager Help Desk. So the Help Desk is a service we have where you can call in, email, and speak to experienced volunteer managers that head up the help desk. And with that, we've got a couple of tiers. The first tier is for anyone, whether you're a member, non-member, random who finds the number. We can talk to you and provide general advice on volunteer management, whatever question you've got. Then for members, we've actually got more of a tier 2 bespoke consultancy type situation going on where we can really delve deep into your program. So we can sit there and say, okay, we'll send through your position descriptions, or let us have a look at your documentation and spend some time to go back and forward with you to really do whatever needs to be done. So I encourage you, if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to Diana and Aisha, who head up the help desk. And they've probably forgotten more about volunteer management than I'll ever learn, which is fantastic. And they are really knowledgeable and really fantastic at supporting anyone who comes through. And we've had a really good response. And I think people like to be able to have somewhere to go and just talk sometimes with people and, bounce ideas around. And the ladies are very good at that. I also wanted to point out our very huge calendar of events. So one of the things I'm very proud of is we've got approximately 40 to 50 events, I've lost track of them, that will be running through our 2023 that are all part of the sector development calendar. They will all be webinars, and they will generally, they're all free. And they'll generally also have a recording that's associated with it. So we know that volunteer leaders are flat chat, don't have a lot of time doing things off the side of their desk. So in negotiating with a lot of the presenters, we're either able to record the webinar and provide it to anyone who is registered, or record the webinar and then actually leave it on our knowledge base for use forevermore. So I highly recommend that if you go through our events page and you see an event that interests you, unless of course it says that it is not recorded, then I encourage you to register and get access to the recording and take advantage of the development we've got being built over the year. Now, how this was built was we created 3 streams. The first stream is purely on the national standards for volunteer involvement. So if you're unaware of the national standards for volunteer involvement, it's like the framework, if you will, for ensuring that your organization creates a fantastic experience for volunteers. And there's a national standards page on our website that has a whole lot of links and resources that I recommend taking a look at. In that, what we've done is over the course of 10 months, we've broken up the standards. There's actually 8 standards, and we're focusing on a standard a month. And you're like, hang on a second, Clint, but you just said there's 8 standards and you've got 10 months involved. The first month was an introduction, and the last month is like a bringing it all together session. So over the course of 8 months, we will focus on each of the national standards, and there are 2 primary sessions. The first is an overview delivered by Aisha and Diana, who head up the help desk. And the second is a live case study that's going to unfold over 8 months with Kylie Elliott from the Sydney Children's Hospital Foundation, and they've actually achieved the national standards. And so participants will be able to get on there, hear how Kylie implemented that particular standard, the challenges faced, and how they overcame it, and ask questions. And it's an interactive session, and that's then followed up by the forums that we have on our knowledge base where the discussion can continue over there. We then have a suite of inclusion and diversity sessions and cultural awareness sessions. And they've been aligned closely, if just a little bit loosely, to the national standards each month. And then we also have our third stream, which is all about volunteer management best practice. And again, each one of those sessions has been aligned to, again, if just a little bit loosely, to the national standards, so that each month you kind of know what's coming and what you can expect to learn from that. Again, all free, all available to anyone, far and wide, and I encourage you all to take a look at that. Just speaking about inclusion and diversity, we've got the inclusive volunteering program where we run inclusion training for organizations and really focus on the types of reasonable adjustments you can make within your organization to be more inclusive. And that program comes about focusing on participants who are looking to get into volunteering, who are on a mental health journey or are living with disability. And we talk about how you can make reasonable adjustments to suit those particular participants and can offer ongoing support as well. So if that's something that does interest you, feel free to reach out to myself, or we've got details to reach out to our coordinators, Tony and Alice, who can certainly assist your organization. All right, now the knowledge base. So under our resources and tools section, we have a lot of different resources worth taking a look at. I mentioned the national standards being one, and that's there. But what I do want to draw your attention to in the last few minutes is our knowledge base. This has been a huge piece of work that is continually growing, and it's become the one-stop shop for all our resources, where our videos end up, customizable templates, and pieces of e-learning. So under the articles section, you will find that there are articles on a range of different topics. If you can't find what you're looking for just by looking through the lists, and they are extensive, it's so easy just to type something in and it all works off. Not even keywords, it just looks for words within the document itself. So it tends to find anything you're after. So if I was after, say, emergency volunteering, and there's an article there. Now, they all come up in plain text, and that's been a design choice as opposed to putting a whole lot of fancy artwork in there. The reasoning for that is it will not matter what kind of internet connection you have. As long as you do have an internet connection, it should load quickly and cleanly. And all these articles are also printable. So if you do have a bit of a dodgy internet connection, or you do have people who are not very great with technology, and you want to have a few different things printed up around the office or wherever, you can easily print those. So I encourage you to take a look at the various different articles we have there. And if you find that there is something missing, I recommend you let us know, because we are constantly adding new articles at the moment on probably a weekly basis. We've got videos, and these are on a whole suite of different things. Past webinars, we've got a whole suite of digital literacy videos, which these are really cool. We've created how-to videos on a range of different topics to do with digital literacy. Things like how to use Microsoft's platforms, Google's platforms, email effectiveness. Well, you can see the list there, and it's constantly growing as well. We've got I think we've got about a dozen more videos to come before end of financial year. So do take a look. Really good if you've got people who are maybe struggling with certain platforms, or, we've all been thrusted into this. Tech's been around a long time, but we've really been thrusted to use it in a range of different, in a whole suite of different ranges. So take a look. Very easy to follow, and the best part is it's been designed to accommodate people of all levels, so that everyone ends up with that confidence to be able to operate online and in the digital realm. We've got customizable templates. And the customizable templates, we've actually gone to various different organizations and created generic templates on everything you could possibly need as a volunteer involving organization. And if you find that there's a template there or if you find that something's missing, do let us know and we will source that. We're constantly looking for more, but I'll just open one up real quick. And you'll see that you can just come along and follow the bouncing ball and replace the text in there and fill it out with whatever is required for your organization, save it off, add your logo to it, and end up with a nice suite of templates that can be filed away to form your documentation for volunteers. So we know that in a lot of cases, as people are reviewing their programs and the like, they need to put more documents in place and they don't have the time to really just format things up. This can really help you. And we've also got links to other templates that they might want to consider as well. So in this case, we're looking at the board dispute resolution policy, and the template recommends you also consider the sexual harassment and the bullying policy as well. And finally, in the knowledge base, we have the e-learning. And the reason why I've left this to last is this is something that is going to grow over the coming months. We've got, I'll give you because you guys are on the webinar today, hasn't been announced yet, but it's been worked on for the last few months. We're actually about to release around mid-year a whole suite of e-learning modules on governance, which is fantastic. We know that the best way volunteer involving organizations can get support with their programs is to ensure their committee and their boards know what they need to do and how to support and do the right thing. And we also know that there are courses out there for volunteer boards to partake in, but they're quite cost prohibitive. So we have worked with a team of instructional designers to create e-learning that covers off everything a volunteer board member, committee member needs to know. And whether you are serving on a board, thinking about serving on a board, or just possibly taking an interest in what they do, this e-learning will be available free of charge and easily accessible. We also have on here our 2 handbooks, which I might be a little bit proud of because I've had my dirty little mitts all over. Our volunteer management handbook and our volunteer handbook. And these have been designed to make it very easy to get a whole range of information without the need to go through like a full-blown course. So you'll find that the way we try and do our e-learning at the center is not about signing up to a course and having to progress all the way along. It's about providing modules that are short and sharp, get in, get out, and can constantly go back to. So in the case of the volunteer management handbook, there's 4 key areas. And this will be growing a little bit more as I look at version 3 of the handbook for this year. And we'll just open up a bit. So, understanding volunteering goes through what it is, links to various different pieces of information, interactivity in there so that, even the most boring of large blocks of text is a little more interesting than just trying to read through it all. Resources here on the national standards, so hint, could be worth taking a look at. If we go on understanding volunteer management, you'll see we've also got videos in here as well. Program development and recruitment. Here there's a lot of information around developing inclusive roles, so a little bit more of an extension of what we've been talking about. Templates, we try to link to our templates so that you, as you're going through, if you think, oh, that's a great idea, you can easily get access to those. Even putting some of our webinars in there as well, and trying to cover off everything you need. And then our volunteer handbook. This one's we released last year, and it's about to go through its first major revision. And the idea of this is it's twofold. Firstly, it's great for new volunteers who are looking to volunteer. What do they need? What do they need to know? But it's also great for volunteer leaders because there's components of this that could easily be incorporated in our onboarding and induction. Now, one thing you might have noticed is it just takes a moment to load here. The reason being is because we are trying to avoid putting these pieces of e-learning on a learning management system that requires logins and the sort. So there's a little bit of technical trickery that's going on behind the scenes, and that's why it takes a moment to load the first time. After that, it's very quick. So if you're taking a look with your staff, just keep that in mind that it will load. Just give it a moment. So we'll just take a look at getting started as a volunteer. And again, lots of videos, useful information around the type of checks they need and why, how to go about finding a role, bits on the recruitment process, etc., etc. And then there's also things you might want to incorporate into your onboarding once they're actually on board. How to be an effective volunteer is great for those who really want to lean into this, and it talks about things like acting ethically and Privacy Act. And this information actually has come from the certificate 1 and 2 for volunteering. So really great knowledge there without actually having to sign up to expensive courses. So that's pretty much it for my presentation. Hopefully you got a little bit of something out of all that. More than happy to take any questions you may have. Feel free to open the mics, turn your cameras on so I can see your faces, and let's have a chat.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Clint. That was really good. There's so much information there that I dare say will benefit them quite a lot in relation to your resources and your tools. Thank you very much for the little release of the e-learning module, Secret Squirrel. Good to know. But I think also it's really good to hear about that talking and the listening and actually hearing what they've got to say and getting to know your volunteers, understanding and reducing their barriers and increasing their motivations is pretty good. Anybody else have anything that they'd like to open up and ask Clint, or stick your hand up and have a chat? More than willing to let you jump on in. Don't be shy.
I don't bite, I promise.
No. They're notoriously quiet sometimes, so we've just got to prompt them a little. But we'll definitely be making all of these resources and all the links to your strategies and your volunteering report and your website and all your tools, and also the recording link today to this volunteering webinar into our member update across our website, so that there's access all round, so that everybody, if they didn't get a chance to come along today, can jump on and have a listen and a learn throughout at their own leisure.
Fantastic.
So we haven't got any raised hands there, no little questions that have arisen. There was lots of information there, Clint. They're probably just digesting it all and taking it all on board.
Absolutely. And look, feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions. If you find that anything's missing. So part of my role as in the sector development engagement space is to actually look to provide the tools and resources to make your life easier. Okay. So please feel free to someone's saying that Vicky, the mics are still disabled.
Yep. Not for long.
There you go. So let me just pop into the chat there my email address, and sometimes I'm a little slow on email because it looks like a dog's breakfast in my inbox, but I will get back to you, and I'm always open to suggestions because my job is made easier when people tell us what you need as opposed to me guessing what you want.
Sure, yeah. Well, hopefully the microphones are working now, people. If you've got anything, just raise your hand and jump on in. No?
I'll jump in. Thank you, Clint. That was really interesting. I'm finding the most need for volunteering for us is administrative and not meaningless. I don't think there's anything meaningless, but they're not exactly sexy and exciting and, all of those things. Because to work with a client and to work in a more meaningful way would require a lot more time, and not everyone likes older people. So it's looking at some of our administrative roles to develop them into a precursor for a training for someone younger. We can teach them the ethics of an office and basic A to Z, and how important it is to be a good employee by being a good volunteer first. So hopefully some of your more recent offerings on your website might help develop that volunteer role into it, and actually say it's a 3-month or a 1-month thing, and we just have a constant turnover of volunteers coming through. Who knows?
I want to just jump on something that you've said there, the administrative stuff not being sexy. Now, I love that. I love that for a reason. I'm going to use an example here, and it's a little bit out there. It's not quite administrative, but just mindsets of people. So one of the things I was running at Edge Radio, for instance, was a podcasting course. And I love podcasting. I think it's fantastic, yada, yada. When I train it, there's a couple of components. There's the creation of the podcast, which is always fun. And there's the lead up to it, the interview and all that. And then there's the actual doing the podcast. Then there's the part that I find as painful as ever, the editing. So I'm delivering this podcast training and going through it all, and I'm telling people how to edit, and, you know, it can be tedious and painful. And as it turns out, one of our volunteers at Edge, lovely lady by the name of Wendy, who I noticed she was asking a lot of questions around editing. And the reason being is she's just found her passion in life. So she really got into the most tedious side of it all, the editing, the part that most people would rather outsource, would rather pay someone on Fiverr to do. She gets into it and loves it. And ever since then, it has really hammered home a point that someone once told me. Someone will love even the most ugliest of tasks. So my advice with the administrative is think about how you can put that out there to get someone who would love it. There are people out there who love working in spreadsheets. I work in spreadsheets and would rather have a tooth extracted. But there are people who love it. They love making them bounce. Promote that. And then think about, well, what could you do? So some of the administrative tasks, particularly in this world with Microsoft Office 365, it's all in the cloud. Do you need that work done 9 to 5? Now, obviously, I don't know your full situation, but can it be done after hours? And so you might have someone who during the week sits there and does their 9 to 5, whatever their job may be, but they'd be nothing more excited than to help an organization out by making spreadsheets bounce and Word documents and all that. And if you can promote that this can be done anytime from anywhere. Now, some of the best volunteering I've done has actually been done sitting down by Kingston Beach. And I mean that. I sit there and I've had an average day at work. I need a circuit breaker. I need to sit there and create a PowerPoint deck for whatever it is. And I go and take myself 2 minutes down the road to the beach. I'm connected via mobile internet and I'm doing some volunteer hours. And you know what? Edge is not the wiser where I did it. They've just given me the ability to do so. And I promote this to everyone. We've all got very busy lives. Suddenly, not only are you tapping into potential volunteers who love this stuff, love the administrative side of it, but now you're also giving them the flexibility to do so just by thinking up, okay, what are the real requirements? Do they need to be in my office 9 to 5? Or can they be working on this from 10 till 2? Maybe to, you know, early morning people, night owls, Count Dracula type people, and you can get the best out of them.
Thanks, Clint.
I'm also just popping in here the link to the national strategy, guys, so you can take a bit of a look. There you go. So yeah, feel free to pull down the very huge PDF I got on there. What's it say? 88 pages. It's not all 88 pages of hardcore reading, but it is worth a skim to have a bit of a look. And yeah, definitely if you're also not familiar with the national standards, take a look at that as well. It all starts to go very much hand in hand. Any other questions for me, guys? Feel free to ask me anything.
No, nothing coming.
Looking good.
Shakes of their heads there. All right. Well, thank you very much, Helen, for that. That was a great question. And also your little podcast story with that painful editing side of it. You're right. There's so many people out there that just live and breathe spreadsheets and admin stuff and all that kind of. You'll find them. Yeah.
They're there. They're
Do the right promotion, huh?
Yep. Exactly. Right.
Well, thank you very much, Clint. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day today to present to us. It's been highly interesting. Are we able to get the recording, the copy of the slides?
Yeah, sure, not a problem.
Right, I will.
I'll flick that across to you shortly, Vicky. And yeah, more than happy to, as I say, if anyone wants to bounce off me later as you're sort of thinking through things, please reach out.
All right, beautiful. I'll make sure that they get the recording links and the slides and all of your contact information and links to all of these other pertinent information that we've received today. So they've got easy access to it all.
Excellent.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us, and looking forward to seeing you at the next CTO member webinar. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.